All right, so today I want to explore this idea that, modern alpha males are discouraged from seeking help from therapists and that they should just get up and work out. They shouldn't intellectualize their problems and whatnot. Generally, there is an established fact that males are less likely to seek help from professional therapists, unlike females. And right now, I want to explain this gender gap from two perspectives. From general scientific perspectives, where I will explore the major differences between the central nervous systems of females and males, and then I will get to this modern alpha male trend where males are just encouraged to work out and don't just rationalize their problems. Now, the first fact to consider is that male brains are more specialized than female brains. So generally, male brains are characterized by front-to-back activity, whereby prefrontal cortex is used and utilized to control the instinctual drives. And on the other hand, female brains are characterized by more lateral connectivity and lateral activity. That is, their left and right hemispheres are more interconnected, which points to more holistic and integrative psyche. Now, the second fact is that on average, males are better at spatial reasoning tasks, whereas females are better at verbal reasoning tasks. This is explained by the fact that males undergo more exposure to testosterone in their prenatal development. And testosterone here acts as a force that virilizes the central nervous system. And this is also corroborated by the fact that females who undergo sex change therapy and they are administered testosterone, they experience an increase in their spatial abilities. Now, this general scientific overview nicely reflects the historical mythopoetic understanding of the differences between males and females, namely how it manifests through fiction and myths, through the differences between male's hero's journey and female's hero's journey. So the characteristic aspects of male's journey is that he is basically going in the underworld, into the unconscious, and he's slaying the dragon, and then he basically overcomes this, circularity, the serpent that bites his tail, which symbolizes this mythic, holistic, circular reasoning, which male has to basically pierce through with his triangular phallic force, which is symbolized by the sword. And basically, this is the arc whereby the Athenian forehead, gets a dominion over the unconscious forces of the darkness. This is known as a victory of order against chaos. However, the female journey is radically different. Females do not just slay dragons or, in the case of Perseus, use the forces of the darkness as some form of technologies, like he did with Medusa. Rather, their characteristic journey is to swallow up the forces of the unconscious, to integrate them into their psyche, to form a harmonious communication between the forces of nature and the world of logos, the world of the word. If we look at the example of the Snow White when running in the forest, instead of defeating or picking a fight with the forces of the darkness, she made friends with the animal world of nature. That is, she integrated the unconscious into her life through communication. Not active action, but communication. Now, there is a reason why right hemisphere, which is responsible for holistic and, Gestalt understanding of the world, which is also responsible for understanding the subtleties of text, such as simile, cynicism, irony, and other tropes. Right hemisphere, which is imagistic in its reasoning, is associated with the feminine psyche, whereas the left hemisphere, with its, pedantic approach, with its, abstract categorical reasoning and intense hyperfocus, is associated with masculine psyche. Now, if we look at the epic trials of the psyche, which is a very good illustration of female's hero's journey, we can see what it means to have a feminine psyche, no pun intended. That is, a holistic and interconnected brain. Psyche was punished and put to an ordeal by Aphrodite, who was angry and jealous that his son Cupid fell in love with her. And basically, this story shows how nature assisted Psyche in her predicament. In her first trial, she had to sort out barley, millet, poppy seeds, lentils, and beans, a form of left hemisphere categorization problem. Here, ants came to her assistance and helped her sort the grains. In the second trial, she had to gather a golden shining wool from sheep. Again, she finds help from a reed who guides and informs her. Then, with the help of an eagle, she had to fill a crystal vessel with the water of the spring that feeds the Styx and Costus. And lastly, the most important trial, she basically had to go to the underworld, that is the world of the unconscious, and fetch the beauty cream of Persephone, which she had to bring to Aphrodite. Here, she was also helped by the speaking tower. Speaking Tower informed her about the intricacies of the underworld, how to find the entryway to the unconscious, about, the danger of Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guards the gates of the underworld. She was told about the Charon, how to behave before the Queen of Hades, Persephone, and the list goes on. Basically, the Speaking Tower gave her all the guidelines about, the world of the unconscious, about the Hades. Now, what is the common denominator between all those four trials? The common denominator here is communication. Communication with nature, whereby nature assists her in her ordeal. So the communication between female and nature, a form of therapy session, if you will, with the unconscious world of dynamism, pre-rational forces, and nature proper, is a characteristic theme here. Whereby female brain is not to be understood as something that is emancipated from the pre-rational world of unconscious. Rather, it is something that is expected to find a harmony between nature and the world of logos, that is, world of culture. Now, the reason why these differences between males and females is so important here is because it nicely maps onto what the emergence of psychology and psychotherapy and psychoanalysis amounts to. Namely, that it amounts to the eruption of time and feminine psyche, whereby time is a modus operandi of the right hemisphere and space is the modus operandi of the left hemisphere. And as we're going to see, these two principles, space and time, nicely describe the major philosophical differences between the male psyche and the female one. According to Austrian philosopher and an expert on psychology, Gebser, basically the emergence of psychoanalysis resulted from the death of God, whereby the death of God basically abnegated the principle of verticality, whereby people were supposed to form a connection with the sky, with the world of diurnal visibility, the Apollonian world. And now that the God is out of the window, what is left is the subject, the psyche. So the principle of archaeology comes in, the principle of time. It is an eruption of temporality, whereby right now what is left is to archaeologically investigate one's psyche, to pierce through in the deepest layers of our consciousness. To quote Gebser, what happens following the announcement of God's death at the outset of the last century? What do the heralds of God's demise seek thereafter? Men. And what do they find? They find the shadow of God, just as Faust finds Mephisto, his dark side. And turning away from the Father God and the diurnal visibility of space, finds the domain of the mothers, that is neither place nor time. The unknown God was lost, and now man searches after the unknown, the unconscious. Now, the central tenet of psychoanalytic theory, or central presupposition, if you will, is that basically unconscious world, or your unconscious, is hidden to you. You are not a master of your unconscious. Your unconscious realm is basically independent of your control. And that's where the therapist comes in. A form of medium between you and your unconscious, a secular priest, that is, who, unlike a regular priest, helps you to connect with the underworld, that is your psyche. Whereas priests, they worked under the principle of verticality, upward verticality in this case, where a priest was, supposed to help you connect with an abstract principle of God, as opposed to the, dynamic world of unconscious. Because keep in mind that for Freud,
or for even Jung, unconscious is not a compartment in your brain. It's not a room. Rather, it is a form of dynamic thing. It is a process as opposed to a thing. However, this situation, that is the death of verticality, or the death of God, which deprives the society of pure masculine abstraction, creates a more feminine space, that is a space of interconnection and integration. Jungian psychoanalysis, for example, is about integrating the unconscious elements into your psyche, thus forming a harmonious unity with it, as opposed to being disturbed by the hyperactivity of particular archetype that might disrupt your waking consciousness. Now, believe it or not, most of the time male achievement is characterized by everything but being interconnected with your unconscious. It is characterized by suppressing your unconscious, suppressing your libidinal urges, whereby it will show up or will be channeled into productive social endeavors. So it might be the case that being interconnected or being harmonious with your unconscious impulses might not be the best option for males. So we could say that psychoanalysis, as an endeavor that seeks to help you reconnect with yourself, is characteristically a feminine undertaking. Now, I want to make it clear that psychoanalysis and, probing myself and, my unconscious is my favorite endeavor. So here, a feminine, masculine is not to be understood in the modern alpha male sense. Feminine or masculine intellect here has nothing to do with sexual orientation or general masculinity or femininity. Now, there are regular male philosophers and thinkers such as Martin Heidegger, for example, Friedrich Nietzsche, who have feminine intellects. They are on the feminine side of intellect, whereby their mode of producing work is characterized by more loose association structure, by more holistic understanding, by more emphasis on time rather than space. Whereas, for example, Bertrand Russell can be characterized as a spatial thinker who has, vulgarly masculine intellect. So it has nothing to do with sexual orientation. There are normal heterosexual males that have more feminine intellects, and other normal heterosexual males with masculine intellects. Okay, so it has nothing to do with that. So getting back to psychoanalysis, it might be the case that for females, reconnecting with oneself is something that is naturally expected of them, whereas it might be the case that for males, it is of utmost importance that they should not be harmonious with their unconscious forces, as I've already said. So all in all, a psychoanalytic approach might be interesting to a male who dedicates his life to philosophy or psychology or anthropology or cultural studies, but it might not be the best option for regular males who do not have characteristically intellectual lifestyles. It might not be the best option for, let's say, a modern disaffected male who just wants to get money and get women, or just conquer the world. Now imagine a Protestant of, Max Weber, for example, who is trying to be as productive as possible, who's trying to be a God-fearing and a law-abiding citizen, and who's trying to be, a provider for his family. Exploring his dark forces and exploring his unconscious might be in the way of his goals. It might not necessarily suit him. So to wrap up the first part of the video, we can conclude this with the opposition between space and time. Here, space, that is the world of extension, is ascribed to males, basically symbolizing the attempt to conquer the world of extension, which is characterized by geometry, math, Newtonian mechanics, even classical music. Whereas the dominant principle in females is time, where dealing with periods and recurrent mood swings create a sense of change as opposed to stability. So, for example, according to Gebser, then, psychoanalysis is a result of an eruption of time. The same with, for example, archaeology. Same with a particular type of cultural anthropology, which tries to understand different epochs with regard to their time frame, as opposed to projecting, let's say, a Western consciousness structure onto them. So, for Gebser, Death of God is then followed by the type of disciplines, for example, the interdisciplinary researches that are more integrative and holistic. So basically, it is an emergence of more feminine-centered right hemisphere endeavors. The eruption of temporal framework, as opposed to the spatial after the death of God, for Gebser is symbolized by Impressionism, non-linear art, space-time continuum as a new understanding of the world in physics, as a fabric of the universe. Where you get this understanding of gravity as a fabric which is warped, for example. Romanticism, quantum mechanics with its properties that are not conducible to the typical left hemisphere intuition, and the list goes on. Now, in the second part of this video, I want to touch this, current alpha male trend, whose basic tenet is to, stop intellectualizing this problem. They need to stop overthinking about it, and, they should just go and do push-ups and go to the gym and basically think more about the financial side of their life, instead of, starting to research depression and taking mental problems seriously. Now, I think that this trend symbolizes a couple of things. First, it definitely foreshadows the, therapist falling out of fashion. As time passes, more and more people will turn to, charismatic internet leaders or cult leaders, as opposed to, having their psyches analyzed methodically. Now, the reasons for this is manifold. First, we need to realize that the theory of psychoanalysis that was established by Sigmund Freud came forth as a result of him working with middle-class Austrian patients in 20th century. So this might not necessarily apply to modern American disaffected males or ethnic minorities. You see, I don't want to be a dick here, but most of the time, the problems that people face or that people talk about on the internet might not necessarily be something that you can solve with a psychoanalytic approach. Now, generally, Homo sapiens is a successful species because we're social animals and we have a particular capacity, a form of sixth sense, a religious musicality, that is, to basically conform ourselves to cult leaders, to perceive the resonance of charismatic leaders. So this idea that enlightenment basically failed is no surprise. Most of the people aren't going to be, rational investigators who are going to just solve their problems independently or with an intellectual endeavor like doing a therapy session, which, yes, by the way, therapy sessions and psychoanalysis as a theory is an extension of the old European book reading, linear, abstractly intellectual world. Want it or not, psychological consultation is an extension of the Western intellectual spirit of typography, where you investigate the subject matter by penetrating it with the power of method and power of the mind. The method of psychoanalysis is broken down into 5 parts: talking, interpreting, relating, experiencing, and centering. Such a methodical, slow, and instrumental approach simply doesn't resonate with modern males who just want to be shouted at. It so happens that people are just searching for prosthetic fathers on the internet. They just want those charismatic leaders that were dominant in all human history, and they just want to, be told to just work out. They just want someone who is going to talk to them with an assertive voice. They don't want your investigation, excavation of their unconscious minds, okay? They just want someone who will just command them to go and work out. And it is that simple. It is that simple that, in future, psychology and psychoanalysis is going to be a plaything of an intellectual elite. Also considering that psychotherapy is extremely expensive and majority of males cannot afford it. So as time passes, more and more people will turn to these charismatic alpha males, okay? Because it is more organic and more natural. Since the dawn of human history, people have just blindly trusted their cult leaders, and it will stay this way. Just because enlightenment came through doesn't mean that it can be actually put into practice. Most of the people just won't be rational, and it is a brute fact. So there is a reason why Andrew Tate, for example, became more successful and popular than Jordan Peterson. The reason is simple. Jordan Peterson's stuff is a bit difficult. It needs some brain. You need to stress your mind. You might even need to read some things. You might even need to read a book. So Jordan Peterson's stuff is a bit difficult. And your Tate stuff is easy. Okay? So most of people, they do not want to stress their minds. By the way, psychotherapists are very exhaustive. They're not just, walk in the park. So for the concluding remark, I want to ask a finishing question. Why is it that right now we see the emergence of cult leaders and charismatic leaders? And why our therapists and public intellectuals are falling out of fashion? Well, the reason for that is provided by Marshall McLuhan, the media theorist. According to Marshall McLuhan, in the electronic age, where the whole world is compressed into one hot, brimming tribal village, causes the breakdown of intellectual categories such as linear space, cause and effect, rational thought, logical step-by-step analysis, sequential argumentation, and related intellectual capacities. The reason being is that the mechanical world, that is pre-technological world, is linear and slow. Windmills, steam engine, trains, typography, and all other characteristic things of the pre-electronic technology, they are slow. So in those times you get a train of thought. Okay, most of the people aren't suffering from ADHD. But with electronic technology and with the speed of light, those intellectual categories such as cause and effect, which requires this slow, methodical approach where you can actually experience, things being separate from each other and causing one another. Now with the speed of light, you get instantaneity and simultaneity, where everything is compressed into one form of electromagnetic cavern, which retrieves the tribal, hot, and temperamental world. So the internet is a space for tribal wars where new chieftains and shamans will substitute old, slow, and methodical psychologists and intellectuals. As time passes, more people will rely on charismatic leaders who will simply tell them to get up and stop whining. Why? Well, because the Enlightenment project of making people rational is doomed. It is a doomed project. And the dark ages of tribalism have begun. Now I would like to send special thanks to my Patreons, who are responsible for my motivation and energy to make videos. If you want to become a Patreon and support this channel, which will be greatly appreciated, you can see the link in the description and also in the comment section. Thank you for your attention.